already. But I'll do a little reintroduction to myself, and perhaps, you know, keep in mind that although this will touch upon governance, it's really trying to approach the governance question from a whole system question, something I know that you're in here, and there'll be overlaps with everything that you're doing. This is really yeah, in a way, what's the right word for it? We're sort of meeting and morphing, you know, and that's really where Dave and I are, you know, in a conversation about how do we work together really in the future. So, as Dave said, I've got quite a lot of slides. Wasn't quite sure how much time I was, you know, wanting to take. Please do interrupt if you feel something has to be asked. And I'll rush over a few of the slides just to keep it sort of manageable for a decent discussion at the end. So I'm going to share my screen. Whoops.
Oh, good grief.
Here we go. Okay, so just a really quick introduction to myself, mostly to give you some sense of where I'm coming from and, you know, what my history is and why do I take this kind of perspective? Why is this my entry point? So, yeah, I'm a psychotherapist. I was trained in conflict transformation. I specialized in something called soft power and spent quite a long time in advising, running a consultancy on soft power and advising government. Then I decided to concretely move into the political field because the question that I've been nursing all my life is, you know, where is our agency as individual and collective human beings? You know, what are the structures? What is the culture? What is the conditions in which each of us can feel that, you know, in our lives we're able to explore our agency, become our full selves, and have an impact upon the planet, that this is not considered a selfish goal for human beings. So yeah, top right-hand corner is me acknowledging my sort of world citizenship, you know, identity. I'm Indonesian and Dutch. So I've had a, you know, family that's both Muslim and Catholic. I myself am a Buddhist. You know, I'm trying to give you as broad a sort of entry point as I can to explain really why it is that I went the way that I did with my politics. To the left, here's my book, The Politics of Waking Up, Power and Possibility in the Fractal Age. But really, I'm going to take us back to about 10 years ago, well, 8 years ago, at the point where having been part of a political think tank for about 10 years, and even standing to be an MP myself, I came to the conclusion, as many have already, that politics is broken, and what's the alternative? And in the UK, this was very specifically around the time when the UK was being really extremely divided, and one of our MPs was murdered 5 days before the Brexit referendum. And I wanted to look at how it is that we've got ourselves into such a state that we can't come together as human beings to solve the crises that we face. So I tend to look at it as a sort of 4-quadrant perspective on a social reality, or even a social imaginary. And some of you will recognize this kind of 4-quadrant way of looking at things, where you're on the one hand looking at it from the point of view of the individual, and then you're looking at it from the point of view of the collective, and then together they make up a whole, but still you have to preserve some level of understanding it from the perspective of each of these quadrants. So the crisis that we're facing, whether it's environmental, whether it's social justice, you know, there's the multiple crises that we're in, inequality, can be seen from this perspective of, you know, loss of well-being for the individual, like internally incapable really of managing the life, the modernity that we've created. And on the other hand, not having any recourse to action and not having any agency in this system. From the collective point of view, of course, you'll recognize the climate, environmental crisis we're in, and the crisis of social justice, and the lack of any really formal power structure that can give ordinary citizens any real purchase upon the crises that we face. So in the UK, this was quite practical. Only 2% of people are members of political parties. And that 2% gives rise to a very small bubble of thought and imagination that the media feeds on, and it becomes our shared narrative. The idea that that we as ordinary human beings, we're sort of powerless, comes from this lack of engagement, lack of opportunity to participate in decision-making processes. But at the same time, I would say that over the last 30 years, we've been in something of a revolution. And if you look at it again from this four-quadrant perspective, it's a revolution of, access to information. We're all alert, and that we're all able to get access to the information that we never had before about really why our lives are the way they are. Our behavior has begun to change with access to technology like this. We're beginning to move not only into the communities that we occupy, but micro solidarities all over the world. We're able to mobilize and group. This may seem very over positive to some people, but if I look at the way that structures and ways of organizing, of ways of coming together have evolved, I'm describing this as the feminization of the public space. It's very slow. It's not on the surface, but the way that we're now relying on networks, we talk so much about relationality. We're very conscious of our emotional narratives and so on, so on. I'm describing this as a very slow feminization. And then in terms of structure, we've moved from being straddled between the local and the global, and now we're living in this cosmo-local reality where, because we've got our heads, with access to the internet and to everything, but our feet are still on the ground. I'm describing this as cosmolocalism. And right at the heart of this revolution is this new concept of a human being. So this changing idea of what is the human being is very core to everything that we're talking about, really. And when we're thinking about regeneration, this is absolutely core to the regenerative principle. We're no longer just seeing ourselves as, Homo economicus. We're just people who need material things. We need a tax cut. We need the roof over our heads. We need a job. That is all that our political structures are really responsible for. We know that is not the truth anymore. We're not simply Homo economicus. We are complex human beings. I call them bio, psychosocial, spiritual entities. This kind of realization of a much more complex human being, which is throughout our media, throughout our technology, our social media, and something that is not necessarily being tracked, but it's just unfolding and being experienced, especially by the younger people who are digital natives. This, as I said before, it's very core to the need for, but also the possibility of regenerative futures. So, I quite like these two images, this moving from Homo economicus to, to human beings that are capable of being planetarians. We're capable now of thinking of ourselves as directly related to the planet. I'm going to say a bit more about that later. Another one of the benefits of our life on the internet is this sense, this much more literacy around emotion and how we share the language of emotion. For some people, it's too much. They can't really, they can't bear it. They don't like the emotional language that has now become our currency. But it was essential in a way. It was an inevitable part of us waking up and having more access to each other, that we begin to notice and demand the emotional needs that, in fact, from a scientific point of view, do need to get met. These emotional needs do need to get met for us to become socially healthy and able to be self-reliant and able to hold space for each other. So you'll notice that this language and these needs are being actively met by social media all the time. But you will also notice that previous to the way social media tries to get these needs met, it was being met by advertising. So advertising was already very conscious and was self-taught in this language of emotional need. But what it did, instead of helping us to get these needs met through community, it was really obliging us to get these needs met through consumerism. So, the need for status met by a handbag, the need for belonging met by a certain brand of drink, etc. The need for achievement, by your car or by your insurance company. All of these were actively being met by advertising in order to sell us into an addiction with consumerism. So in a way, nothing new, but the fact that we are shifting our ways of getting our emotional needs met, only very slowly, of course. Some people will say it's not really happening at all, but I perceive, certainly through my own therapy practice, that this is more and more an offer, that there are other ways to get these needs met. These are the resources that we already have to get these needs met. I won't dwell on this for now but I can come back to that if anybody wants to. And then this concept, that all of us are developing all the time. So everything I'm describing here is pointing at our development over time. And that development is something that, again, is core to our sense of what is regenerative. We ourselves as human beings are able to evolve and regenerate. So therefore, we should be designing structures and economies and governance systems that reflect this human aspect of us. Again, I'll skip over this, I won't go into it, but these are, just to highlight that over our lifetimes, but also within our communities, within any given polity, because of our developmental natures, there are many different forms of agency that are, trying to come together, in the same place. We have people protesting, we have people institution building, we have strategizers, we have people fighting for human rights, people just building the spaces for sociocracy. These things can all be happening at the same time in any one community, but they satisfy quite different needs and different capacities. So the need for this, a diversity of agency, is core, again, to any regenerative project, to my mind. And here, I just wanted to use a few slides here to really, emphasize how much this evolution of the human being, the coming into connection, the technology with our neurology, the way that we're designing things that are in a way natural to us, is all part of our development, the revolution we've been in for 30 years, but also a future that we can be actively building. The more, in a way, people might call it biomimicry, or they might call it, there's a number of words for it, but what we're talking about is moving towards something that is, at the one hand, more natural to us as human beings, but then also essentially regenerative. You'll be familiar with these kinds of patterns and models that nature offers us, which are that are definitely influencing the way that we're building structures more and more. Always available to us. And here I want to talk just briefly about what I call community agency networks. We originally called them citizen action networks. It doesn't really matter what the actual words are, but we call them CANs for short, because they really emphasize that for all of this incredible potential and all this diverse forms of agency, if we don't have some sort of container for it, it just gets dissipated through the internet, easily polarized, easily manipulated by others. Whereas when we build these containers, within our communities, for example, could be a neighborhood, could be a town, could be a city, could be a bioregion, the container-like aspect of it becomes the thing that makes it, that gives it traction and that gives it, you know, the ability to nurture. It's more like, yeah, incubators, of course, but also almost womb-like structures. You know, when it's contained, things can begin to interconnect, interrelate, correlate, become interdependent. This is what happens. It's like a body takes shape, and that is the essence of the cans. And then when you connect the cans that are intricate, you know, slowly evolving entities, you connect them to each other, you begin to see, as we did, that these cans have been really appearing everywhere. It's not something we initiated, it's not something we began, it's something that's a natural evolution of human development, that people should come together, even in the face of our political structures that are dividing us. People are coming together, building complex communities with complex capabilities that are capable of holding complex human beings. And the fractal nature of that, you know, the way in which all of these different cans around the world are, you know, have common properties, common patterns. So the fractal nature of that is what, for me, is the most hopeful part of all of this, because you don't have to be centrally, you know, making this happen. This is happening, a lot of this is happening of its own accord, has some things in common. And really, as we're perfecting the models of these cans, not ourselves, but, you know, all of the work that you're doing in the you know, Global Regenerative Collab as well, we are co-creating this improving model all the time. And I sense that as the model improves more and more, it'll be easily copied, easily replicated through the you know, the activity of the internet. Just quickly, these two slides again, just one of them, just pulling out again to another big distinction between hard power and soft power, which just makes a big difference to how we govern. So hard power refers really to guns and money, you know, forms of coercion. Soft power is more storytelling, narrative influence, the ability to shape preferences. So, you know, soft power is the power of attraction. And again, because of the internet, more and more people have been able to generate influence, have power because of their soft power more than because of their hard power. Nowadays, a Greta Thunberg, you know, can change the operations of, you know, the armed forces, or, you know, of a foreign office, simply through the power of the attraction of her story. It's not all good, of course. The same happened really with ISIS. You know, you can tell a bad story, you can tell a good story, but it has the potential of having immense power now because of our technology. But we're still, even so, we're still living very much in the public space where, you know, we can easily be drawn, we can easily be manipulated through these emotional narratives. It's quite difficult to know which ones are really ultimately going to be good for us as a whole, or which are going to be leading us down rabbit holes. We all know that right now there's quite a battle for that. But so ultimately, the bottom line is that when we started our question, if politics is broken, what's the alternative? We came to a conclusion that, you know, there was, you know, what was needed was, you know, at least a new political axis that responds to all of this development that we've seen taking place, and that political axis really connects the complex human to, you know, complex communities which have a global impact. But, you know, do we have to, is this really a massive, you know, endless patient building project in which, you know, we're going to be struggling for decades more, you know, to keep trying to scale up, you know, our efforts? Or, you know, or is it, you know, or is the more important thing the way that we shift what's really going on in our minds? So what we're noticing is that, you know, the way that soft power operates is that it shifts your thinking, it shifts your mind, and it shifts your social imaginary. And that the key really to the shift that we're looking for is quite subtle. You know, it's not wholesale correction of the old system, but a subtle shift back to something that was always there, really, in a way, a letting go of the things that, you know, in a toxic way have driven us off our course, and in a way, letting go and moving back to things that are more natural to us. And this shift of our mind, when we shift our mind in this way, you know, we don't need anymore to do what Elon Musk is inviting us to do, you know, is to go to Mars and start all over again. We're saying we can do that in our minds. And that once we are shifting in that way, we are describing this shift as the move to planet A. So when you are really in the mindset that is regenerative, that you have reconnected with yourself as a human being, and you are reconnecting with nature and the planet in a new way, and you're beginning to see that society can be, and in a way always has been, through communities, through families, through bioregions, we're really reclaiming a way to stand on this earth. But it's, you know, it requires you to sort of hold that sense of being on the earth in that way. And that's what we're describing as planet A. And so now the alternative has given birth, if you like, to planet A. And that's now our invitation to people to come and stand in this space with us. And just this year on March the 1st, we decided to introduce 4 incubators, what we call incubators, that help this idea of planet A actually concretely take shape. Again, it's a 4-quadrant approach. You can see the first incubator is about what is the new practice that we need to be able to stand concretely on this ground, on this regenerative ground. So that's begun as an exploration. And when we say practice, we're not really referring here to the internal practices of mindfulness and meditation and so on. We're thinking more about the practice of being in community with others, cosmolocally, you know, able to live in these 3 realms, you know, of self and community and planet. How do we develop the capacity for that? What is the education system needed to be able to do that? So that's the incubator 1. The second incubator is really somewhat to do with what we're doing here, which is, you know, how do when we get the can of cans, when we can link the cans together to each other, what do we find ourselves doing in our daily lives? What are our practices? You know, what is our work? What is our food? What is our money system? You know, this is all being asked, these are the questions being asked in this eco-civilization through the can of cans. On the bottom left, we're saying, you know, when we've begun to shape these new narratives, feel that we're connecting to each other in new ways, how do we, you know, amplify that? So the third incubator is about building a new media system, which helps, you know, which allows the interconnectivity of the cans, but also does the work of trying to represent all of that work in ways that speak to people who don't agree with us or who aren't already in our, you know, in our circles or even in our value system, so to speak. Nothing will change unless we can generate a language and a form of attraction, really, that speaks to everyone, but still draws them back to this regenerative system that we're all busy building. And then finally, this question of the new political system. What would that look like? What could it be? So the first element of that, given that we're talking about governance here, the first element of that new governance system or the new political system that we are pointing at is this idea of a parallel polis. The parallel polis is something that was, you know, initially described by Václav Havel. It was a dream space, really, when the people of Czechoslovakia were under very strict communist rule. The artists, the theatre designers and directors would come together and then invite people from their communities to just imagine a better future, imagine a better system, and start to design it actively, which they did. So they had, in a way, almost like a blueprint for the system that they would design if they were free to do that. When the miracle happened and the communist, bloc fell, and Havel was actually, was the first president of the Czech Republic, which was quite a fairy tale scenario. However, he wasn't able to bring this about. He didn't immediately. He couldn't simply unveil his, this new system, because once you're back in the public space of the old system, it's not nearly as easy as it looked when you were really isolated and working in a vacuum. So we're saying that what we need to build through all of this regenerative practice and people moving into regenerative ways of being, that we need to develop a parallel polis. We need to keep our space, almost like an autonomous space, and keep developing the system, that Buckminster Fuller said, building the old one that makes the old one, the new one that makes the old one obsolete. So, when we're thinking about governance, we're thinking about what is the governance of this parallel polis. And probably within any of our lifetimes, this will be a parallel structure. It's not designed to overcome or to beat the other system. It's trying to come into being on its own terms, so that it can really fulfill the potential that we're seeing, while disconnected, well, not fully, but in partnership with the old system. So pieces of the architecture are already there in the parallel polis. You'll recognize these things: citizens' assemblies, people's assemblies, polis, open space technology, sociocracy, constellation work. There's many, many more. There's many, many bits of this architecture already available to us that we're slowly trying to make coherent and move into relationship with each other, so that we can all reach for that and begin to build this, original. I say original because we've never really had a democracy, worthy of the name. There are places already that these experiments are taking place. You'll be familiar with these places in Rojava, in Madrid, in Jackson, in Kerala, Taiwan. I mean, there are many, many places, many bioregions, many municipalities. People are experimenting already. However, while they do that, there is no real connectivity between them, so there's not much agency. It's just a developing field of practice. Another experiment that we thought we are doing through the new media system, is to generate through all the people that we feel are, and somehow participating, what we call a living manifesto. So let's at all times be trying to use our technology to come up with ideals, for this new system that we are trying to build. And a living manifesto means it's, it could be constantly shifting shape. It's not set in stone at any point, but it should have some rhythm, and it should have some method for generating it. And then, of course, the big question is, will there be a new political party implied ultimately in the new governance system? Well, certainly in the UK, no point at all, because of our first past the post system. There are places in Europe that it would be worth a try. And just recently, I realized that it would be worth a try in Scotland, because Scotland has a national parliament with a proportional system. So yeah, that's basically it. The big questions, the outlines, the history, the possibility. I'm going to stop there.
Indra, thanks so much. That's really fun. Yeah, everybody just leave it open for responses and thoughts. And it looks like Michelle's got her first hand up.
Hi, Michelle.
Thank you, Indra. I feel so inspired ever since I started reading your stuff a couple of weeks ago, and so much admiration for your work and your clarity. I just want to sort of lift up one thing, a couple of things. I have a question and then lift up. One is this metaphor, this idea that we're not trying to overthrow a current system.
Mm.
Like, I mean, I can't speak for anybody else in this space, but I know from our work with Circle Forward, we definitely feel that we definitely have come to that as well. And the metaphor we use is of a house.
Mm.
We're living in a house that is, you know, the infrastructure is crumbling. Some of it maybe wasn't built all that well to begin with, and termites are eating it, and windows are cracked. And we're living, but this is the house we live in. Meanwhile, we're building a new house with more space for more people. There's more comfort. It's more efficient. It's more stable. We're building that house because the house we're living with is we're not going to have to really help it too much to fall down. And occasionally, because we're living in it, we might need to patch a few things or participate in something like, yes, I still go and vote, you know, in my local elections, even though, you know, or I might have to call my senator at least to see what good it does, but at least because it's, and for me, it's partly because people fought and died so I could, you know, so just in honor of that ancestry. But so anyway, that's the metaphor. And then recently,
do you want me to respond?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Or carry on if you, sorry, I didn't want to.
Just one quick little thing.
Yeah.
What Elizabeth Wilkerson just wrote she was talking about her book Cast. She's the one who wrote, you may not know, but a really fabulous book about the refugee immigration from the South called Warmth of Others. And then she wrote Cast. And I heard her on an interview, and she's using that same metaphor. Like, if you had a house, now her thing is like, we have to repair the house but anyway, that's all. That's my whole thing about that. I have a question about constellation work. Do you mean family constellation work, or is that something I don't know about? And that's
Can I ask your first question first, because it's a really good one. Yeah, and I really thank you for that question. I love your metaphor of the house. I think that's a great one. I think it works very well. You know, I think for me, because of having been in politics, you know, directly, I have witnessed how much energy it takes to try to overcome the old system, and how you get dragged into the cesspool, you know, and you can waste your life. I wasted a lot of time, you know, trying to correct or improve or reform the old system, until I realized in a bigger picture of history, that could just be a blip, you know, that could be a piece of history that passed. I need my energy, and you know, to be a fully regenerative person, I need to be able to focus on the new thing. So it's as simple as that if I was to say we're trying to overcome the old system, it would just call out of me a very different person. You know, building the new one is much more human to me. It's more feminine, I have to say. You know, it's like when you're trying to raise your child, you say, okay, stop comparing yourself to the other person. Try and become yourself, right? Don't make it about the other person. Don't make it about overcoming them or beating them. You know, let's focus on becoming your full self, and that's how you'll become strong that way. And that's really what I'm trying to say. It's a allocation of my energy. And if I don't see the parallel nature of it, then I also can't see that, you know, I need something. It's like, to me, it's like two legs, one body. We need to stabilize the whole system in order to give Gaia the best chance, is the way I would see it. So when we think about the old system, we're designing a political party that is like a Trojan horse for the old system. But its only job is to represent the parallel polis. It doesn't have its own range of opinions on the current system. It's there to represent the parallel polis. And in the UK, we've got this phenomenon called flat pack democracy. I don't know if any of you have come across this, but it was exactly this two-leg approach where a community in Frome came together. They came together across the divide. So, you know, disgruntled members from all political parties were coming together in this place. And then they named one party, which they called the Independents for Froome. And that party went into the elections only on the promise that if they won, they would do everything through participation with the people in the community. That was their only promise. And they won. And they won that. And then they won many, many more councils throughout the UK. And it's like a slow burn because they're there in the system,
right,
taking over the old system as the Trojan horse from the new system. So it's just a subtle bit of architecture, really, that we've seen is our best hope. But I think from the point of view of the old house, new house, it's totally coherent, I think, with what we're doing. There's no difference, I don't think, ultimately.
In the US, I think we see it in these networks that Circle 4 is working with. It's multi-sector and multi-stakeholder, and local, particularly local municipalities and state government are in the network, right? So there's individuals who are bringing that perspective, and then maybe, anyway, that's enough of that. I see Lynn's hand, so I'm going to hand it off.
Thank you. Yes, Lynn.
Indra, thank you. That was really comprehensive and inspiring. And it's interesting. I'm kind of follow up maybe what Michelle was saying. I know your just most recent editorial in the alternative, at least the one I read, was about the tower block being demolished and how it kind of it's a careful process of falling in on itself. And then but there's the new that's ready, and just the coordination of that. I thought it was really an interesting metaphor. It's like a planned collapse. But my question was around the parallel polis and whether you see it as having some continuity over time, or whether it will completely replace the traditional, very dysfunctional. So it's like, will it, in your view, will it replace, or is there kind of some parallel role that it plays that tempers the other? And then I just want to ask if you know about SIMPOL, which is that notion of simultaneous policy, which also uses the citizen assemblies, there's a synchronicity of similar thinking that brings it to these larger sort of wholes. If you could comment on that, how that fits.
Yeah, I mean, I've known John Bunzel, funnily enough, for years, and I immediately saw what SIMPOL was offering. But I remember saying to him, but we don't yet have the narrative or the structure for that to succeed. Let's hope that succeeds, but we're not ready. An MP signing up to SIMPOL has no power at all. I mean, it makes no difference at all. I mean, he could have all of them signing up and still nothing would change. What has to change is there has to be a really strong call from the people. And that call has to be really structured and kind of constituted so that it looks strong enough to have purchase on the MPs within the old structure. So really the building part of this, I'm always slightly nervous because I don't want anything to become solid or too structured when we're talking about society itself. It needs to be fluid. It needs to be, creative. It needs to be human all the time, but it needs to step up to its responsibility as well now. So, the people, we're moving into an age, we're moving into an age where people are seeking more agency. Our young generation, they want to know, what can I do? And they want to be active in changing our situation. So we need to create these structures for them. The informal nature of society is not enough anymore. So this is our evolution as a civilization. So I would say that within my own personal ability to see into the future, in my, a foreseeable future, let's put it that way, I see the parallel nature of it as necessary because there are still people who will hold, in a sense, what I'm going to describe as the boring work, of raising taxes, spending taxes, holding, making decisions about resources. What has to shift is the responsibility for how those decisions get made, according to what values, according to what vision of the future. That needs to shift to the parallel polis, in my view. And you won't get that unless it's kind of organized in some way. So the organizing of the parallel polis, which doesn't even really exist as a thing other than, the people, that's the uphill work we've got to do now, is to get some sort of loose organization into our society, that people feel, okay, this is us self-organizing now. People are coming together. In the other leg, they're still being divided, actively divided all the time. This is the counteraction. People coming together, overcoming whatever it is that stops them coming together, building structures to make decisions, making real decisions about the energy in their own community, the food, the kind of houses they build, the kind of rituals they make together, the theater that they might, throw up, how all this stuff that they've never thought before that they could be generating and innovating.
I love that. I just want to underline that wonderful notion of like, is there the boring, like it reminds me of master and emissary type stuff, is there kind of that guiding, more visionary, that imaginal, that then gets grounded, but you don't have that dominance of the, of the current structure. Anyway, love it. Thank you so much, Indra. That's really cool.
I love the left brain, right brain illusion. We could go on for another one for 10 minutes there. But for me, what is important about what Ian McGilchrist says is this, it's not left, right, actually. It's left and whole. It's left brain, whole brain. That's really what we should be emphasizing. And that to me also is a sort of feminine masculine principle. It's, it's triangles versus circles. So, they can be part of each other, but we're not going from left to right. We're not going from, we're going from partial to whole. And that's why this is why it's regenerative. Yeah. Dave, hi. Oh, yeah, sorry, thanks. Was it Dave first or Catherine? I couldn't. Yeah, Dave.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Indra. It's so interesting, and I mean, one of the things I've been trying to do a lot of these sessions is to try to understand my own narrative a little bit, and I feel like I want to take some activity, I want to take action, but I want to understand why. So I kind of have advice I want to give people, but then I don't know if it's really good advice. So I have to test it a bunch, and I guess one of the things I'm concluding from this conversation is that, okay, if we're really going to lean into the notion that we're in a complex society, I feel like we often say, "Oh, this is all complex, and we need to do something about it." And then we come back to non-complexity strategies, right? So we say, "Oh, it's complex," but then we don't really mean it. We don't know how to live in that. And so I'm trying to figure out how do you live in that notion. And one of the things is it's very messy, right? And it's like you don't get to to trim off all the edges. It's inherently messy. And one of the things that feels to me that is we also we forget the past. And so like we have been through these cycles before. I mean, we've had, horrible times in history, much worse times in history, frankly. And that we forget those, right? So we're only aware of kind of the 20 years or so that we're aware of. And it is probably true that our modern time, the system's heated up. It's moving faster. I think that may be true, and that the technology is probably one of the drivers of that moving faster. But global interconnectivity, everybody's educated, everybody gets to eat. I mean, we have the things that have made the world better have also made it move faster and made it more dynamic and scarier. And a lot of what we're seeing, the division comes from the fear that's generated by the speed of change. And so we've spiraled up into a new problem set of the global commons, where we didn't used to have, we had rules for a couple hundred years around how to manage the oceans and stop piracy and things like that, right? I mean, like we've never dealt with this before, but we've gone across country boundaries and things like that. And to me, that's what drives a bunch of the new governance requirements, is that the old boundaries don't hold. You know, they used to work in our strategic sense, but now they don't. And so, you know, this is where things like polycentric governance, or even probably the simple kind of notion, we're striving for new approaches that allow us to tackle this new level of complexity that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. So these are the things I've kind of took from some of the stuff you're talking about. And I have no idea whether you meant them or not, but this is the kind of feedback I'm looking for. Is like, is that what we mean? And so therefore, focusing on opportunity versus problem is one of the devices I would recommend, right, for going forward. Is, you know, we can't solve the old problem. We have to solve the old problems. They don't go away, right? There is some level of effort that has to go into making sure kids eat, or, you know, that there's not violence on the streets. I mean, we don't get to stop doing those things, but we need a new level of opportunity capture, which is, you know, things like how do we regenerate landscapes and things like that, that are kind of positive opportunities. And to me, that's a regenerative component that we're adding into the complex system that we're dealing with. And that's, you know, anyway, I guess that was more of a treatise than a question, but thank you very much.
No, and yeah, it's for me, thanks very much, because that's how I feel about it, what you're describing there. I take something from the metaphor and also the maybe material nature of our human bodies, you know, that we have, you know, different organs in our human bodies. Each organ has its own microsystem, you know, it has its own needs, it has its own way of operating, it needs, you know, it has a logic, and therefore it can also, you know, become diseased in a particular way, and it will affect the whole body. And so the wholeness, you know, the ability for the different organs to come into the right relationship with each other is complex, you know, but needs to be achieved, right? And we know that our medicine is only some of the way towards understanding how that really works. But at the same time, there's also, you know, a skeleton, you know, something that's relatively rigid that holds that thing in place as well. You know, that can also break down, that's also being affected by the organs and so on. But, you know, that's a little bit more predictable, you know, the skeleton and the muscle groups and so on. Yeah, this trying to build a governance system of some kind is really saying it's not everything, but it helps to somehow structure our response, you know. And I think that's really what we're trying to get at now, is nearly everything, really, in a sense, a body is just a space, isn't it, for holding life. And each single cell, you know, has the life potential. It starts as a single cell and it becomes a body. I mean, we're not short of metaphors, you know, for trying to make this whole thing come together. And the body, for me, is a really useful one. That's probably, you know, because we made it up ourselves, but
well, and I stuck in a link to Ostrom talks about polycentric governance, right? Which to me, it's like, you know, we've got multiple. We need more layers, really, and more. And I feel like a lot of our current critique is to look at the current system and say, oh, neoclassical economics is bad, you know, or there's all these bad people, or you know, you're kind of trying to explain why the current system doesn't work. And I guess so. Part of my thesis is that you can do that. You can spend as much time doing that as you want. But really what we need to do in this paradigm shift is add another layer to the system that's going to make it more complicated and messier, that kind of moves us beyond the current system, right? So
I'm not sure about the layer, Dave, because layers for me suggest, you know, imply ultimately you know, hierarchies in some way, or, you know, we look after this piece, whereas for me, I think the moment where we realize that the brain is we only have, you know, the brain that's in our head is only one source of control of the body. You know, when we understood another one was in the gut, you know, everything shifted, and now there has to be a relationship between the brain and the gut and the heart. You know, these are different sources of logic that need to move into relationship with each other. And I think for me, it's a bit more like that. I'm not sure I'm
Yeah, so maybe
about
layer
layers.
isn't a good framing. But it is an
Yeah.
increase in complexity,
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
not a reduction in complexity. It's not something that's going to
Yes.
simplify the system. It's going to
No,
actually make it
quite so.
even messier.
Messier, but you know, we need the backbone, so let's make sure we got a backbone as well, you know. So yeah, anyway, I think we agree, I think. Catherine.
So what I'm wondering, because I really love what you're saying. I think we're very much in agreement about a lot of that. I'm wondering about timeline, because I think we're living in two timelines. We're living in this a timeline of possibility, and then we're living in the Earth's timeline, which appears at this point to be a little different from ours. And it's going to create tensions and choices that we're not used to making. This could be really useful if we had it in place to help us go through that, but I don't see those two necessarily on the same track. So I'm just wondering how you think about that, how this could be supportive to addressing the external forces that we're going to be dealing with, so that it becomes a positive transformation as opposed to something more difficult.
I want to add a third timeline to your timelines, which is my own personal lifespan. I've no idea how long I'm going to live. I could fall under a bus tomorrow. And I say this to myself every day.
Well, I'm 80, so I do too.
Yeah. And you probably know as much as anyone that the weirdness, you know, of anti-aging and all sorts of other things that are now coming into the picture means that none of us know, right?
Yeah.
None of us know how long we're going to live. So it's multiple timelines, actually, to my mind. And I think there's two things about that. First of all, you know, I'm a Buddhist. So one of the reasons I came to start working like this is because I felt, you know, I faced a lot of death in my early life. So my brother died, you know, 6 of my mother's brothers and sisters died when I was in my teens. It was quite something to grow up in. And this constant facing of death really was the reason I think I became this sort of focused on where is my agency? You know, what can I do about this thing that keeps happening to us, right? But also it lifted me into that space, not immediately, but over time of, you know, if I'm not doing today what I wish I had been doing for the whole of my life, then I'm wasting my life, you know, do it now, don't wait. So that's one aspect of it, is the being in the here and now and not necessarily being too subject to, well, I see this fulfilled in my lifetime. That, you know, sort of take the edge off that a little bit, because you don't know what that is anyway. None of us do. You know, we could have a nuclear bomb at any point, right? So there's that aspect, but then there's the other aspect of, okay, well, let's take the timelines, you know, as you suggest, you know, do we have enough time anyway? And I would say that pre the birth of the internet, if I, you know, when I was working with conflict resolution and I was, you know, working with soft power and I was working with these kinds of terms, I wouldn't have been able to take on the issue of our environmental crisis at all, because I could never have seen how we could have done anything in time about that. However, with the birth of the internet, I've seen so much change in these 30 years that was really unimaginable. And I don't just mean in a physical way. You might say your towns and cities still look like the same place, but what's going on in our heads and what's going on in our minds and in our lives is so radically different than it was 30 years ago that I'm not so sure about time anymore. And then here we are as if one revolution wasn't enough, we're on the brink of another one right now with the artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We
Oh, yeah.
honestly don't know what we're capable of. That is something I'm slowly moving into at this minute, trying to hold my nerve. But this certainty that we don't know what we're capable of is right here again, second time in my life. So I don't have an answer to any timelines, to be honest. Over the next 5 years, we might find ourselves living in quite a different world than we had even imagined, even when we were wishing for it. It could be infinitely worse. It could also be infinitely better. None of us really know. What I do know is you have to be active in your daily life as if you only had today left, because the technology requires you to be active, putting in your data into the system. You being you matters to artificial intelligence. Every day, you being you is going to be feeding this new system. So don't stand back. Don't divorce yourself from this thing. You're part of it. You need to be. Thanks, Catherine. I wasn't quite sure whether we were finishing at 5, Dave, or whether we had some flexibility around that, or because I saw that.
You know, I'm sorry, but I got so engaged, I totally lost track of the time. I can stay on, and I don't know, Indra, what your constraint is. So
I'm not in a hurry, actually, as it happens. I mean, I could, if anybody has questions, but I don't want to, unnecessarily extend it.
Yeah, so people should feel free to drop off, and we do have the
Yeah.
recording going. You can always come back and watch the end.
Mm.
But I would hate to stop the conversation if you're able to keep it going.
Oh, yeah. So Russell, sorry. I thought, Daniel, you had your hand up, but was I mistaken? I'll go to Russell.
Yeah, Catherine had her hand up, but she took it down. I'm happy to allow her the chance if she wants.
Mm.
Okay, so yeah, I love what you said at the end there. And I don't think we have an option to, like, this, the whole thing is interconnected, right? The politics, the community, our internal space or whatever. And as we, I don't know about your experience, but my experience the last few years is I've been forced to face my inner issues. And as I face my inner issues, the outer issues shift in totally surprising and unexpected ways. And I see governance in the same sort of lens. And I typed in, live in the solution, and Dave pointed out that that's indicates that there's a problem, which is true, and which brings up the sort of like we live in a container that's sort of artificial, right? We've done the best we can. We have political systems, we have government systems, we have all these systems in place to try and control our resources and fight and defend and all these things. And yet the whole entire thing is set up on a way of being that is totally destructive to our continued existence. So I do think that we literally have to let that system fail and develop a new system. And I also think that system is already in place. It's just we have to recognize it. We have to live it. We have to, find it within ourselves at the same time reflecting it outward, right? And then that way it's not complex at all, because you find your mission, you find what makes you tick, and it's in that healthy, healed state that you now have, and it just falls in place, right? And AI can be seen as something evil, or it can be seen as a tool for good. And I think, again, it comes from what your state and your internal state is. How are you going to use these new tools? You can use a hammer to bash somebody in the head, or you can use a hammer to hit a nail and build a house, right? It's just a tool.
Hmm.
And so I'll wrap it up here because I do have to get off. I would like to have a discussion about sociocracy, but I do. I was all in about it for when I first discovered it, but now I see it as a sort of evolution again, right? So sociocracy is a tool that we can use. Everybody's going to be different. All groups of people are going to be different, and we kind of have to do this because of our time constraints. I love the timeline conversation because you know, it's everybody has their own timeline, right? You know, how are these meshing together? Sociocracy is a tool just like the others, and it has its place, and then it has its, you know, not so nice things, and it has its really nice things. But the tools that I found that were really useful, like nonviolent communication, being in a circle with trust and love, those things can be used outside of sociocracy as a way to weave this together, if that makes sense.
No, that's all. That's all. Thank you for saying all of that. I'm on the same page as you with this inner outer, significant, surprising change. I think it's the one that oneness, of the inner and outer, I think is, once you get it, then you have agency. Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing that sometimes is not mentioned that much is that the public space as we've experienced it until now is a public space that was designed, by, no offense to anyone here, white men. It was designed by them, right? And I have a lot of sympathy for their responsibility, but also what they suffered in the process of being that, outside of the home. But to remember also that in the home and in the private space and in communities, there was always relationality, there was always space, there was always a coming home to reclaim the whole human being. And the structures of that always existed, throughout this period of time. So we don't really have to invent them. It's not the inventing of them. It's for women and men to have the courage to bring them into the public space and reconnect with that if we want to be regenerative.
Yeah.
If we want to be regenerative, let's reclaim our regenerative tools and structures and practices. This is as difficult for women as it is for men. And well, maybe not as, but it's also difficult for women and to own some of that and say, I can do that. So much so that, I'm in so many places where, despite the fact that women maybe have been doing this work, unpaid, unrecognized all their lives, when asked to step up to the stage and own it in some way, there's a reluctance to do so, because almost as if it belongs in the private, almost as if it belongs in the, the not public space. But this, for me, is the big revolution that is slowly happening already, but needs to happen more, which is this idea of the social architect. If you're capable of doing that in your home and you're capable of doing that in your local community, then you need to become the architect of this new society with these capabilities. So yeah, it's a kind of a growing up of civilization, to my mind, where the men have to recognize how they've been victimized themselves by their own, by their own design of modernity. And there has to be a lot of sympathy between the sexes and support each other in building this new, and of course allowing new sexes to appear in the midst of all of that. I mean, it's an incredible burgeoning space. the only time I think, wow, I could write a novel about this. And then I think, oh no, hang on, my life is a novel. That's what it is. I don't need to write it at all. It's just, I'm just being a novel. We all are. Lynn. Anyway, thanks, Russell. I agree with you.
That's delightful. This is your book.
It is.
And I have on my website, I quote you. I think you might have said this in a STOA session. I think it might be in your book, but I love it. We must not pull back from our collective moment. We are adequate to this. Let all of its difficulty ennoble us. And I absolutely adore it. I don't know whether you remember saying it or writing it, but for sure I wrote it down somewhere. And I just wanted to kind of end my own comments on the note that I think there's a piece to this where it is about changing that relational space, but there's so much available for people to kind of come into themselves and, have that centering and that sovereignty of, being fully who they are. And I think that's the promise of this time. So, but I love that. And I just wanted, if you know where you said it, I would give a proper reference, but
honestly, I think I must have just said it because somebody asked me a question and I must have responded in that way. I don't recognize it, but thank you so much. I feel so honored.
I think it might be the STOA session, maybe.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a lovely session. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to, for me as a kind of closing thing, I don't know if any of you are, use TikTok or you watch TikTok or whatever, but it may not be your thing. Because we are actively trying to build this media system, we're there and watching and listening. And a young friend of mine told me to go and look at this hashtag core, CORE, and I do recommend it. It's not easy watching, but what it shows to you, core means like really at the core, this is what the problem is, this is what we're suffering, this is and core is doubling that, like right at my core, this is what I'm feeling. And kids are using TikTok to get to that place, right? And in this strand, in this video I was watching, it's kind of heartbreaking, and I'm going to I'll share it with you later. It's just young people saying, I'm only 15 and I already want to check out of life. I can't see anything in this for me. I'm just trapped in this. It's capitalism, I'll never get away from it. I'm already I'm exhausted before I even get out of bed. I'm already exhausted for the day. I've got too much on me. I can't live this life. I can't, and then there's this young boy saying something like, I refuse to work for anyone who doesn't see me as a human being. I refuse to work for someone who cannot even see me as a human being. When I hear that, I can just feel it in me now. I just want to say, I'm here for you. This is what it's for. And thank you for naming it, because my generation never named it even. They didn't even see that their lives were so wasted in this way. But these kids, they've seen it. They can see that they don't want to waste their lives the way we've wasted our lives. And all of this that we're doing, this regenerative project, it's so, it's answering the thing they're already calling for. And I honor them for calling for it. And I'm saying, okay, if you're calling for it now I know who I'm talking to when I'm bringing this work. I'm doing it for that. So I love it. So, and that, makes me feel hopeful. And Daniel, you do have your hand up now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know it's the very end of the session. I just want to drop a question here. Not to be answered, of course, just a question. Do we actually have anything to offer? Or we're just using time, being nice with each other, and be hopeful that things will change regardless if we succeed in our purposes or not? Do we actually have anything to offer to these kids who reached the core that we were unable to reach 30, 40, 50 years ago. I don't think we have. We are having nice time here, of course, but I don't think we have, as a civilization, as a bunch of societies, we don't have anything to offer better than they already have their TikToks. I don't think we have more honesty or more truth than they find in TikTok. Basically, because we are much more obliged to fulfill our own mindsets than they are. And we have just much more luggage to carry on than they do. And because of that, we are much more deaf and blind and obliterated than they are. So I don't actually think we have anything to offer to them. We should learn. We should try to empty out and learn what they have to teach to us. That's just the question.
I'm not sure it's a question, Daniel. It's a challenge. I can answer that question for myself. I look at myself every day in the mirror with that question, and I can answer that question for myself. And my answer to myself is yes. But I can't give that answer to you. I think that you have to answer that question to yourself. And when the answer is still no, then you have to challenge yourself more. Each of us should have to go to the mirror and ask that question every day. I'm with you. I'm with you on that. But I don't think it's for us to answer for each other. You have to answer for yourself.
Daniel, when you say we, do you mean we, this group who are conversing, or do you mean we, the generation of people sort of working in this regenerative space more broadly?
I mean Western white people.
Western white people?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
that's what I mean, Western
Thank
white
you.
people. We have our lives full of privileges. I was wondering if it would be proper to bring an example of people who had lost their everything because they were extinguished. The last remaining of a language people, the last living person of an entire civilization was killed, was murdered the end of the last year. This man, about his 40-something, was murdered in Western Amazon from a language that was as far away as English and Armenian, belonging to the same family group. So the much that we lost the opportunity to learn with them about a completely different mindset, and we lost it. So this person cannot wait, or this group, they can, using the CAN, they can not wait to be hopeful to gather among themselves because they've been killed by Western white people. So when we bring this kind of example to us and try to make an answer, I don't think the answer should be individual. Individually, I do not have the power to change the Western mindset. So it's not enough to just say yes in front of the mirror. That's why I'm here having nice time in this group. I don't think this is an individual issue or purpose to be fulfilled. I think it's societal in the first hand.
Which is really what we've been describing. Agreed. And how do we bring these together? So when we're talking about cans, we're talking about cans in Africa, in China, in South America. It's a global phenomenon. And India, it's recognizing, you see, first of all, I hope it's all right just to say I don't identify as Western white. You know, I'm Indonesian as well as Dutch. So there's some element of that. But one of the things that and I hope you don't mind me trying to answer you a little bit, even though I will hold to the responsibility of being able to face myself every day. One of the things I noticed when I was doing the conflict transformation work and also the soft power work is that the global narrative is the one that I'm referring to, the collapse of something is a white narrative. And that very often when I hear, for example, long discussions about the meta-narrative or the collapse of civilization, what I realize is that we're talking about the collapse of our civilization and the collapse of our narrative and the collapse of our language, because in other parts of the world, that's not their story. So I came very hard upon it about 3 years ago when I was doing some work on climate change, and I had 3 young Black women in my group, and they didn't want to be part of the conversation. And I said, well, why don't you want to join in? And they said to me, it's not my climate. It's not my climate disaster. It's not my environmental crisis. And I learned so much from that. I learned so much from that stance. And I think it's true. I mean, I had to acknowledge, they had their own story about what it was that they face every day. They had their own crises or opportunity. It was completely different from the way I was describing it. This is our collapsing building. This is our English language that is inadequate. We're talking about our crisis, not the crisis. And when I let go of that, sometimes I see that in different parts of the world, including, for example, in the heart of the Amazon, or in China, it's a very different narrative. Some people are living very strong and fulfilled lives, and they're believing in what they're doing, and they have a different idea of history and a completely different way of expressing reality. And I'm so happy for that. But it's not only about their collapse. A lot of it is about their strength and about their own development. And there's just completely different sources of excitement and concern. So I'm totally with you on that. But then I don't become responsible for their regeneration. I'm only trying to create the interconnectivity and the space for each part of the world to take it on in their way of taking it on and being in their story about what this present moment is. But you're absolutely right to say that when we talk about it, we're talking about ours. It's our crisis. It was of our making, and it's our collapse. And we're the ones who have to find new language and new ways of going forward. Rick.
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting conversations. I was wondering if you'd be willing to share your email. I went to your LinkedIn profile, but you need your email to be able to connect, if you'd mind, because I feel like we're just scratching the surface here of many issues. And, I sort of understand a little bit of where Daniel's coming from in terms of his perspective. But what I did hear from your response to that, it was more of an individual perspective than a we perspective, even though that wasn't your intention. But that's how I heard it, which I just want to point out a discrepancy there. But I want to come back to something that, you know, the issue of storytelling, which I think is incredibly important. So we don't have equitable opportunities to share our stories. There's huge inequities, and who has voice, who doesn't have voice, and are we even willing to listen to other voices? And a concept that I've been grounded in for several decades is one of cultural humility rather than cultural competence. And one of the issues that I feel coming from the regenerative space is more a focus on regenerative competence than regenerative humility. And with that comes a little bit of hubris that regeneration is the, you know, is the foci that will help transform it. I think it's a sort of form of reductionism that doesn't take into consideration the complexity about how you can rally people. So, you know, you have to say, well, how are you going to bring citizens together to be able to take on the dark side of AI, which is coming? There's no question, it's already here. And it's going to be as bad, it's going to be worse than the advent of social media. So I don't think we should go into this any naivete, because unless we look at the ethics of AI governance and look at the meta governance of it, you know, the dark side is better organized than the lights of the progressive wokes. And so I think there's a little naivete about the hopefulness of what we can do. And unless we really look into the eyes of the dark side and say, how can we bring them into the light? We've got a work cut out for us. So I just wanted to share some reflections. I stayed on long. I was going to go at 12, but unfortunately I'm not pushed for time, so I can stay on. But to me, this is just the beginning of a much longer conversation. And one of the things that I find about these types of forums, and I usually sit and say nothing because I just listen. And at most of the time, I know David's laughing, but most of the time I'm listening and I'm taking notes and understanding things. But the issue is, how do we create learning communities that are that co-create generative dialogue? And one of the things that I've witnessed on this platform is we spend more time focusing on an antiquated educational method, which is, you know, it's usually, you know, facilitator centered, sage on the stage, you come, you go through rotations of things, and it's not really getting into deeper dialogue. So I've been trying to raise this, nudge the needle a little bit on this in terms of how we can move to co-creative generative dialogues. So I went further than I expected what I was going to say, but anyway, I'll leave you to react to what I just said.
Yeah, there's a few things that I would say, and you know, thanks. I don't think there's anything I disagree with what you're saying. But I just want to take the first point first, which is I versus we. I versus we. Yeah, there is no versus, right? So I think that the I part is important. So I learned this very much from my psychotherapy, social psychotherapy practice, but I also learned it from Buddhism. If there is no sense of the I, there's no sense of self-sovereignty. There's no responsibility. Responsibility can too easily be leaked into the we if there's no sense of I. At the same time, there's no contradiction really in the human self. You know, the I and the we are two realms of the same being in my mind. I can be a we person, I can be an I person. When I work in a we way, I'm working with communities. I think you'd be hard pressed to say I'm not working in communities. I spend all my time working in communities. This is a we community right now, right? We're listening and talking. So I don't really buy the I-we contrast. You can move into the I and you can move into the we, same human being. we maybe need more structures generally for we spaces, but I would say that's maybe more, dare I say it, a male need. I think women have endless spaces for we structures. They are constantly developing them. It's a way of being in the world. So that also, in a way, bleeds into a little bit of what you're talking about with the naivety. Of course, we're naive. You know, none of us could claim to know how the world really works, or none of us are claiming to understand everything. Still, we would choose a path, right? Still, we choose a path to the best of our ability. And we're making minute by minute choices to generate something, or stand in the questioning space, or actively destroy something. I mean, where you are with your agency is your choice. You know, so what I'm doing is, because I feel a lack of actual building structures and architecture for agency of human beings, I'm really focused on that. I'm trying, you know, in a sense, and I'm with other people trying to do, I'm not alone in this at all. I find that there's so many people in that work. Every day I'm meeting more of those people. So no lack of that, no lack of needing that, no, and always willing to be naive. I think naive is important. I'm willing to be naive is very important. Willing to be wrong is important, etc., etc.
I'm not doubting the naivety piece. It's a question of the nature of the naivete. So there can be, you know, what I'm referring to was an optimistic naivete about naivete. And
Yeah.
so you have to be a little bit more nuanced.
No, I get it. I get it. I could finish though, Rick. I've had a lifetime as a woman being called naive, because there's not a real acknowledgement of these structures that have always existed underneath the edifice that's been built in the public space. I've been called soft. I've been called airy-fairy. I've been called wishy-washy. All of these things as part of my identity in the public space as a woman. I've consulted to governments. I've stood in front of NATO twice and been heckled. You know, I'm up for my naivety. But when it comes to really learning about regenerative principles, I think I'm slightly now feeling a bit justified about what it was I was standing for all this time. And the fact that I'm investing my life now in building this more concretely is because, you know, I'm enjoying the fact that it's there to be built. And I'm proving that all the things I was made naive about in the past are now coming into being in very concrete ways. And I would say that I'm really looking at this kind of third act, sometimes people call it, you know, like you've been through your learning process, you've been through your establishing yourself in life, and then you go into what am I really doing with my life? Act 3. I'm enjoying doing the thing that I imagined as possible because it's becoming ever more possible, you know? So I'm happy for you to, you know, question it or say, I need to get more real, or all of these things. I'm so used to this. I'm so used to that way of get with the dark side. Oh my, how much time I've spent in the dark side, believe me. So I can only invite you into the space that we're in when you want to, but I probably won't get derailed, to be honest. I'm going to carry on doing this work like this with others who are willing to do it, and we'll keep going with it.
Can I respond?
Yeah, of course.
Well, I think you've just put up an artificial barrier there, a boundary there by what you just said, because I understand what you said, and clearly it triggered you in a certain way to say what you just said. That was not what you said. I thought, well, that doesn't apply to me. That doesn't, what you know. So, you know, I think we're talking a little bit at cross purposes, and if anything, I actually endorse a lot of things you're saying, but I'm just simply saying, I was sort of dovetailing a little bit on Daniel that, you know, we can come together and I would say, you know, there's different domains of naivete. Cultural humility is grounded in not knowing. So you could say, well, is that naive or not? So cultural humility is a way of inquiring, of understanding others. So, I mean, to me, that is such an important thing. But what I do detect sometimes is this sort of what I call the regenerative competence mindset, which comes into play, where I feel like they're not incorporating other important things because they're so focused on the whole ethos of regeneration as a particular mindset. And so, I mean, we had this discussion before, David, about, and we, you know, there was issues about, well, what's regenerative governance? What's equity governance? What's the different types of governance? And I don't think there's any one governance structure, particularly regenerative, is that going to be the savior. Not that you would even put it in that realm, but I'm saying I agree with it. And regeneration is incredibly important. The Sustainable Development Goals was just a reductionist framework that hasn't really done very much, and it won't do very much because it's used in a reductionist way most of the time. And it needs to be an ecological framework of being able to understand it and also deal with regeneration, equity, and other important domains. So it's broadening the sort of boundaries of collaboration between as a transdisciplinary process. You know, for example, I just put in the chat box a reference to an article in the Stanford Social Innovation Review about the need for political innovation. I mean, political innovation is such a critical point of it. And to say that regeneration is going to transform our political system, I'm thinking, it's going to be there. But, the elephant in the room is our corrupt political systems. And to say that, regeneration is going to, albeit incredibly important, how is it going to crack that nut? When our political systems, if anything, are regressing and being less able to respond to the needs of people.
Rick, when you get the answers to all of that, please do share. Because I can tell you they're not my questions. No, they're not my questions. So I'd be really happy to hear your answers when you get there, because it'll be, it'll be fascinating to hear. But for some reason, these are not my questions.
That's fine. I wasn't imposing them on you as my questions either. My questions, your questions. I was raising them, and of course, I don't have the answers to it. From a cultural humility perspective, you go in knowing that you don't know, and it's, well, how can you bring people together? My question to you is, what are your questions then?
I think I might have been talking about them for the past hour and a half. Yeah, I think I've shared that quite well, and I'm probably overdue stopping talking now. But I think I've really done that quite a lot, and there's a lot of cultural, I would say, cultural humility is the basis of how you design a can. It's the basis of what we're doing. So I'm not quite sure where we've somehow not been able to hear that, but I welcome your questions. I think they're good ones, but I'm not sure they're for me to answer.
Well, on that commonality of cultural humility, we can continue asking each other's questions. As you were presenting, I didn't hear specific, well, maybe I missed it and I can go back and listen to it, but it was more of a talk about your work rather than saying what your specific questions were that you're grappling with, that you don't know the answers to, and how to work towards that. And I'll just say, I'll go back, I'll listen to see whether that was there or not, and maybe I didn't listen well enough, but I didn't hear a series of unanswered questions that you have about where your third phase of life is going.
When you open a space for something, that's where those, unanswered questions move in. So when I was describing how, you know, a community agency network is like a womb or like a pod or like a container, it's because it's designed as a space. It's not designed as a series of solutions. It's for each person to step into that space and ask their questions and move into relationship with each other in the asking of those questions and in the answering of those questions. It's a bringing back to lifeness of things. So it's not a series of questions and answers that we're doing. We're creating spaces for people to ask their questions and find their answers within the communities that they're now coming into relationship with. So the whole regenerative principle, to my mind, is of each thing becoming itself in relationship to the other things in that space. So it's just a slightly different way of being. It's a little bit like what I was saying before to Daniel, is that a lot of our internal questions come from the way we've been encultured by the public space that we grew up in. So if we were taught, you know, to have problems and solutions, then we're going to live in the world of problems and solutions. In different parts of the world, that isn't how they were educated and structured. They were more of, you know, flowering and blossoming, development and, you know, constant learning, being in play. Different cultures have different ways of moving through time than we do. I'm very conscious of that. So I'm already not in the what's the question, what's the answer mindset. I'm in the let's open spaces for people to walk into and find themselves and move into relationship with each other. So already my way of being is not in the question, answer, solution mode. Therefore, I can't really respond to your questions, but I would certainly be interested in how you answer them. It'll be, I can learn from that, I'm sure.
But let me just say one thing. We're on the common page in this regard. And I feel like what you said puts me outside of that. I'm all in favor of open spaces, people coming together to ask questions about wicked problems and explore how to deal with it. So I'm not interested in dichotomous solutions like here's a question, here's an answer. I mean, that's antiquated pedagogy that is useless for dealing with wicked problems. So you had to create that space. But my question is, did we create that space today or not?
Well,
And
I think that when we do, again, when it's a structure situation, and I suppose that if I come into a Zoom room and I want to hear from somebody, I'm prepared to listen for a bit and ask questions, because that's the purpose of that meeting. In other places, I'll be in co-creative spaces in which there is nobody presenting. For me, I like the diversity of those things. I like to go to some places where I'm learning specifically or hearing about a person's journey, and other places where it's completely co-creative. I know where to find those. I shouldn't mix them up for myself because, you know, obviously if I'm going to a webinar, I shouldn't expect to be the person trying to co-create that space.
Yeah.
So I think it's diversity, really. I personally have room for both of those because, especially when it comes to trying to create a CAN, in a community of any kind, there are some people with a lot of, you know, experience in doing something and other people who have no experience in that. And then there are other issues which we've never tried before, and that we all need to be beginners in that. But I feel these multiple forms of agency and multiple ways of coming together is very important for the health of that CAN. There's, you know, I think if there's only one way of coming together as a group of people, then there's a danger, something is missing. And particularly with the CANs, as I experience them, there's a danger of that we have to start from scratch, like trying to rebuild everything from scratch, when there's a lot of expertise in the room that could, you know, that could be brought in and heard from. So yeah, I'm up for the multiple forms of agency. I really know I must stop speaking now, though. That's it. Except Colleen, did you just put your hand up, or?
Oh, I was just,
Imagine
I just was going to say goodbye to anyone who was leaving,
Yeah.
but Yeah, I have found this this hour and a half very valuable. I see in you a person of experience that's parallels my own, and it's lovely to know you're not alone in the world, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
No, thank you. Yes, we've spoken before, and I remember. Yes, thank you very much.
Yes.
See you all.
Indra, thanks so much. Well, and it would be great to, I mean, maybe one of the things that we could still follow up on is how should get involved in the working groups.
Yeah.
To the extent that, I don't know how you're doing invitations to that kind of thing, but I expect there are people who would be, eager to participate if there were constructive things.
No,
to
no,
that we could do.
absolutely, absolutely.
So,
But they're not. It's not by invitation, Dave. It's if you go to the website, sign up as a co-creator, you get to say which incubator you'd like to be involved with. At this stage, we're looking.
I mean, maybe that's enough of the invitation then. Yeah,
At
I'll
this
post
moment,
that to them.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you
We
so
hope to
much for
see-
taking the time.
yeah.
This is really wonderful. I'll post the video to the Slack. I'll send it to you. And
Could I get the chat as well?
yes. Yep.
Dave,
I'll get them
thanks
both.
very much.
Yeah, it'll be in the video link as
Oh,
well,
that's
but
true.
I can
That's
send
true.
it separately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much
Thank
for
you
the
all. See you next
time,
week.
and see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.